My name is Candace Spencer, and I'm a third-year graduate student acquiring my MFA in performance. Now, on behalf of the University of Louisville's Theater Arts Department, I have with me today an emerging artist. By day, she is an arts and nonprofit professional, and by night, she writes. One of her plays that the University of Louisville will be presenting in February is Afromemory. It will be running from February 3rd to February 12th, and you can check these dates and times out on our main website at louisville.edu/theaterarts. Now, I have the pleasure to be cast in this show as well as Sarah B. So today we'll be talking in depth about her one-act play. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Teshonne Powell. Hi, Teshonne.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Now, I just want to say first, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to finally get a chance to talk to you about your piece. And so the first question I have on the agenda is I wanted you to just talk about your interpretation of the theme of Afromemory.
For me, the overarching theme is the concept of, essentially the concept of Sankofa. The ability to be able to take a look at your past and maybe the past of those who came before you, to withhold or hold on to certain lessons that will lead to your survival as a person. And so in Afromemory, there's this world that exists where people are made to forget where they came from, quite literally. And so it's all about kind of taking that power back.
I love that. The concept is just, it's beautiful to me. I'm just really curious on what inspired you to write this piece initially.
For me, what inspired me the most was just in my writing in general. I always tend to talk about ancestry and the power of ancestry. But also, too, it was at a moment where there was the 2016 presidential election. And so there was a lot of commentary about people who were left-leaning being divisive, and, you know, we don't need to talk about race anymore. And by talking about race, you're being divisive. And so it's almost like they were scapegoating race because they didn't want to talk about racism. So the dystopian culture in the play takes that idea, but makes it quite literal and quite extreme. What does it really mean to just ignore race, to ignore cultural nuance in a society? What lengths does a government have to go to uphold that illusion that racism doesn't exist, that color doesn't matter? So it was kind of just being a little bit too involved in really just conversations with people that kept bringing that up again and again, and just the frustration out of that.
Well, that's amazing. Now, I had a chance to skim through your website, and by the way, everyone, her website is tnicolepowell.com. But as I was looking at your website, I found this quote that just really stood out to me. You mentioned, as a lover of stories, I reveled in the prospect of getting lost in fantastical universes where anything can happen, where anyone can do or be anything. But alongside my enthusiasm was the acceptance that people that looked like me did not really exist in many of the stories that I loved. I love that quote. It just really touched my heart. So I just wanted to ask you to talk about if any of your characters in Afromemory mirrored your Black female identity, specifically Sarah B. Or Sarah S.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, the inspiration in I think much of what I will write will always center Black women. I will always have Black women protagonists because that's me. So when I was growing up, I loved science fiction. I loved fantasy. I even loved 18th century period pieces, but rarely did I find that someone who looked like me was at the center of that narrative until I started reading Octavia Butler, for example, and her contemporaries. And so for me, when I was writing, I wrote the main character in Afromemory is like a 30-something, brown-skinned woman. There's no race in this reality, who goes on a blind date. And so I started from the standpoint of someone who's probably going through similar experiences as a single Black woman of today. But where do those experiences lead her? And in this play, it leads her very far down a rabbit hole, as you'll come to see in the play. So I think for me, the main character is struggling with, there's definitely an identity crisis in which she is doing all the right things. She is considered a good citizen. She goes to work, she makes her money, she pays her bills, all those things, but there's still something that's missing from her life. There's still something that's nagging her. And I think, I would consider that I feel the same way on an existential level. And I feel like a lot of us, especially in today's age, just the level of uncertainty of the times of, look, I'm doing all I can, but for some reason in my heart, it doesn't feel like it's enough for me. And so that's kind of what I kind of poured into the character of Sarah B.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about your identity, because I feel like I can relate to that on another level. With me being a fellow Black female, I struggle with my identity as well. And my thesis is actually catered to Black female becoming aware of their most authentic selves, not incorporating the outside world and letting negative thoughts inform your identity. It's about what that awareness of your authentic self can do for that Black female on stage. And it's also why I'm so excited to talk to you right now about this, because your play mirrors what I want to include in my thesis directly. And it's wonderful to hear your feedback. So thank you for that. So next, I was wondering how Afromemory influenced the Black community. Like, what type of feedback did you receive from Black theaters or Black artists, if any?
Well, the last time I presented it was as a stage reading at the Kennedy Center a couple of years ago, and we got a lot of positive feedback from that presentation. It was interesting because the audience was a mix. And so you had, Black audience members, non-white audience members, and there was also a sizable crowd who were white and who were also engaged with the play. I think people really resonated with the politics within the play, given at the time that we presented, it was kind of, I think we were a year and a half into the Trump administration. So people kind of already came with a level of engaging with race in their own personal lives as of late, or at that time. And so they came into the space with that in mind. And I think what I really thought was really great was that people mentioned that they resonated with just with how we need the imperative to engage race in talking about racism and talking about dismantling white supremacy. You can't dismantle white supremacy without engaging and talking about the differences that have defined our identities over centuries. And so I think that was kind of the main kind of takeaway that I received as a playwright from what the audience members were telling me. So
it's interesting to hear the feedback that you're getting, because it's like I'm thinking about this as I'm reading the play and wondering other things as well, like that talk of Afrofuturism. This is what the play is set in. So I was wondering, like, why did you choose Afrofuturistic? Have it set in Afrofuturistic society? And maybe how would the play be different if it was set in the present as opposed to the future?
The play started out as a short play So I was actually commissioned to write a short play for a Black theater company in the area, in the DC area, called Fresh Incorporated Theater Company. And they commissioned me along with, I believe, two other playwrights to write short plays that were supposed to be written in tribute to Octavia Butler, who was an acclaimed award-winning Black female science fiction and speculative fiction writer. And so all of our plays had to be set in the future and carry certain themes that you would see most resonating in her work. And I love Octavia Butler, so and I love science fiction, and so the project was really up my alley. So this one-act play actually started as a 15-minute play. And so because I didn't want to stop there, because as I was writing it and I was coming up with this whole society and this world, I was like, I have to write more. I have to see how this ends. And so that's where I started to draw out the plot to a 60-minute one play format.
So do you focus solely on Afrofuturistic plays?
No, I tend to think of myself as a speculative writer. So I love the idea of writing more Afrofuturism, but I've also written horror. The play that I've produced just recently as a part of the Welders Playwrights Collective is actually horror influenced. That's released right now. But I'm generally interested in magical realism. Talking about real life things, talking about what's happening in our world, but doing so through fantastical elements. So whether that's imagining what it's like to be 500 or so years into the future, or whether that's here and now, but here's these fantastical elements that help tell the story. So I've always, so I call myself speculative to give myself space to explore whatever I want to explore.
And it's crazy because just recently I found the loving for playwriting. I wrote my first little 5-page play for class, and I was like, oh, I want to do this. So it's really exciting to talk to you about your play. The next thing I wanted to talk about was, so you mentioned in your play the aspect of ancestral memory procedure. And I was wondering, where did you first get this idea for the ancestral memory procedure? And if it was happening on stage, what do you imagine it would look like? What do you imagine Sarah B experiencing while she is undergoing this procedure? Is she aware, unconscious, in pain?
Ooh, yeah, that's a lot.
I know.
I can't remember where the idea came from, but I'm pretty sure it's, what I've read from other authors has had to have some effect in this idea of what is a very literal way that you can call on the knowledge and the wisdom of your ancestors. There's a novel that many people might have read of Octavia Butler called Kindred, in which the protagonist, spoiler alert, the protagonist is basically just sucked back into the past, into slave era Maryland, where she's constantly put in these situations and she has to kind of figure out why exactly she keeps getting pulled back there to that place. And so I think with that in mind, the concept of tapping into your ancestors' memories, not just through storytelling, because we do that now, right? We talk to our grandparents and we ask them, how did you grow up? What did you go through? But in this, I just wanted to take that idea and make it no, what have we experienced? What our ancestors went through? What type of burden can that bring, but also what type of power can that bring? How can you be strengthened by those experiences as well? So I just wanted to take that idea and just make it as literal as I could. And the Afromemory procedure, you brought up a good question that it even though I do tend to look at it as an overall powerful and positive experience. It is and can be very painful. Imagine, all of a sudden being flooded with memories of slavery or memories of, of just the civil rights movement or of being abused. And, there's all these painful things too that you are experiencing because someone in your ancestral line experienced them. And so just wanting to get a sense of the weight of that. What does that mean to walk around with that? And the complexity of walking around with that.
Hearing that and seeing your interpretation of this, it makes more sense. I thought, because at first I originally thought maybe it could be compared to an actual procedure of I don't know what procedure I'm thinking about right now, but it seemed like maybe you can cut someone's head open. I don't know. And I was just thinking out there, but it's...
So what I imagined was in this future that the technology is very much a clean technology. It's not meant to be brutal. It's not meant to be too invasive. But I also wanted to leave it open enough for interpretation so that whoever produces the play and designs the play and directs the play has a little bit wiggle room of what they envision that procedure to be. So I tried to create a space where I could say what it is, but then, then the artist would employ their imagination to take the rest home.
I love that. That's something I need to consider when I'm writing, because I usually want to tend to give everything, especially like the actor's perspective, what they're doing each moment. And I love that. So wrapping it up a little bit, I wanted to know what was next for Afromemory. Will there be an act 2? What do you imagine the next steps to be?
I do imagine writing a part 2 for the play. So what happened? I don't want to give it away, but what happens after the final act of this, or the final scene of this play, and how it all carries out. So that is my intention, is to complete the story, complete the arc, and also tend to the growth of Sarah S., her character, because she has some major realizations throughout the play, throughout the course of the play, as well. And so just wanting to make sure that these characters kind of find their way at the end of all this, in a way.
That's wonderful. That's great. Now, I also saw on your website that you were writing your first ever novel. And I was wondering if you wanted to talk about that or talk about anything else that you're working on. How is it going as an emerging artist?
Actually, it's been really awesome. It's been an amazing learning experience. It's just, there's such power. And I think this is really, especially why I love talking to people who are studying theater, because sometimes you feel, and even I still feel this way, just kind of this level of imposter syndrome, or the idea that you don't know enough yet, or that you don't have enough experience to pursue this or pursue that. And I would say, start where you are and take yourself seriously, right now. I don't know how many years I would have, I probably would have been a lot farther in my writing career had I not doubted myself years before and said, oh no, I don't have enough experience in it. I can't take on this. I can't. And so as soon as I started taking myself seriously as an artist, people started paying me. And so, I started becoming semi-professional as a writer. And so the novel is something that I'm hoping to get off the ground. I had to pause it to work on another project this year, but I'm really excited about it. It has to do with vampires, so it's a bit of a horror.
I saw that on your website. I was like, oh my God, vampires.
Yeah, I'm a weirdo. I don't know, but right now, I'm a part of a playwrights collective in Washington, D.C. called The Welders. And we are a group of playwrights that have committed for the next 2 years down, the next 2 years to help each other produce our original work. And so this year was the year that I was supposed to produce something, and I actually produced an audio play. It was originally supposed to be a stage play produced in 2020, but because of COVID, I made the decision to adapt the stage play into an audio play. And that's actually available to stream now. And it is a quirky little ghost story. It's called Girls' Night with Spirits. And it's about a Black woman, millennial, who has a secret that she's not really facing yet. And at the same time, there are things happening in her home that she can't explain. And so a strange and mysterious woman shows up at her door saying that she'll help her, but also has secrets of her own. And so it's really cool, like a little, 60-minute little shindig. All Black women cast, all Black women creative teams. So I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of them for putting their all into that project. And so that's streaming now, and I'm really thrilled that people are receiving that one well and resonating with it as well.
It's great to hear the other things you're working on and your passion as you explain some of the examples of what you're working on as well. I have maybe one more question for you as well. Who are some people that have inspired you? I know you mentioned someone that's inspired you before, but any other people that have inspired you throughout this process of playwriting, acting, writing a book?
I think, when I look at Black creators these days, I am inspired by people who do not pigeonhole themselves. So I think of writers who maybe they started out in fiction, but they're owning their work and their adaptation. So they also write for TV and film as well. And so I'm thinking of Nnedi Okorafor. I'm thinking of Katori Hall, who started out in playwriting, and then now she's writing for TV as well. She's adapting her own material. She's owning her own material. And I love that. And that's essentially what I want to do. I want to be able to have opportunities at all levels of storytelling, or whatever levels of storytelling that I want. I want to be able to tell the story in whatever way that I want. And those are a couple of examples. Lynn Nottage, of course. Tanana Reeve Dew, who is a Black woman horror fiction writer. The Good House is one of my favorite books from her, who's also writing at different levels and just, really embodying what it means to really be a Black storyteller in today's digital age. And so, I think those folks are the ones that I kind of keep my eye on, as far as kind of if I had to do a vision board of where I see myself in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's wonderful. That's great. Just to say, do you have any questions for me?
I guess a good question was, what drew you to, what appealed to you about the script, about the story, and what makes you excited to dive into the work?
So, like I said, my thesis is Black women becoming aware of their true identity as opposed to their given identity, and what that awareness does to the individual on stage. And so it really drew me. The first time I read this play was over the summer, and I was trying to think about which character I wanted to embody for my thesis role. And it was the ancestral memory that really drew me to it, reading about the procedure. And I was like, oh my God, just to feel all of that in the body as an actor, that made me excited. And so it drew me to Sarah B's character. It drew me to this play in general, as opposed to the other plays that we are going to be performing, that we are producing here at University of Louisville. But I know I mentioned true identity and given identity. I just want to go ahead and say given identity is a term that I am trying to use for my thesis, and it's defined as who you are based on your subconscious views from the world or society. And then true identity is defined as who you all authentically are based on your own analysis of yourself. So just all in all, I'm just really excited about this process. I'm really excited to have talked to you. And I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I love that idea for your thesis. And I totally understood when you said given identity, for some reason that clicked with me without you even having to explain it. So I'm really looking forward to when it's published, looking at it and seeing reading it.
Yeah, I'm so nervous, but it's going to happen. But thank you again. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too.